We are back, and alongside Kate Fishbein, I am Tom Farrell. You put us together, you get amplified wealth according to plan. Sorry, I just had to try that one time.
No, that's great.
There's these radio guys I like on a sports show, and they have a great rapport with each other, and they do something like that when they come back from like a commercial break and stuff like that. So,
I love it.
Anyway, we are amplified wealth.
Like, hey, it's Fishbein and Farrell.
Yeah, there you go.
Back for more. Thankful for our listeners.
Love it.
Yeah.
And if you are listening, you get us anywhere you get your podcast. We're also recording on YouTube. We do use slides to illustrate some of the topics that we cover. So be sure to subscribe to that, and then hit that like button, just like you do for all the rest of your cooking videos and gardening shows that you're interested in.
Well, as important is financial health. So that's why we're here today.
Absolutely. So let's keep the conversation going in the world of Roth IRAs.
And it's a beautiful world. It can be a beautiful world.
It can be. It can be if you know, one, how to navigate distributions, which we recently covered. And, if you also know the rules around how to get money into a Roth IRA. Sometimes it's not as easy as you think. Yeah,
it can be hard. Because everyone hears about the benefits of Roth IRAs, and, there's some income limits, which we'll talk about. So, I don't know, are there any workarounds? And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah. So let's dig into some of the rules here, and really the topic that we're going to spend most of our time on in this discussion is this concept of a backdoor Roth IRA contribution. So when it comes to contributing to an IRA, there's rules, as you would imagine, right? And it just so happens that Roth IRAs, they do have income limits when it comes to who is eligible to make a contribution. And Congress says that if you make over a certain amount of money, you are not allowed to make a direct Roth IRA contribution. And so let's take a look at some of the details here. So if you were a single filer and you have a modified adjusted gross income of less than $150,000 in 2025, you can make a full Roth IRA contribution, which is $7,000. And if you're age 50 and older, you can add another $1,000 for a total of $8,000. But then Congress says, listen, if you start making more than $150,000 in terms of a modified adjusted gross income, we're not going to let you put the full amount in. And so there's a range now. So if you're above $150,000 but less than $165,000, you can make a contribution to your Roth IRA, but it's got to be reduced. It won't be a maximum of $7,000.
And that's a small window. So that's going to affect not as many people as within that window. So it's
exactly
a tight window there. It
starts to go away pretty quickly here. And again, we're staying on folks that are filing as single filers here. If your modified adjusted gross income is above $165,000 this year, that's where you can't make a contribution. You're not allowed to make a direct contribution to a Roth IRA. You're out of luck. Or so it seems.
No contributions allowed. Over $165,000 in modified adjusted gross income, filing single, no contribution for you. That's it.
No soup for you.
No soup for you.
And so if you're married filing jointly, the limits here would be higher, but the concept is the same, right? If you're below $236,000 of modified adjusted gross income, you can make your full contribution of $7,000. If you're between $236,000 and $246,000, you can make a contribution, but at a reduced amount, something below $7,000 or $8,000 if you're age 50 and older. And if your modified adjusted gross income is above $246,000 this year, you're not allowed to make a contribution directly to a Roth IRA.
Right. Yeah. So, can be very limiting. And again, these are 2025 amounts, so they will change. They usually will increase each year slightly. And again, we all hear the benefits of having a Roth IRA, right? That, once you're able to get funds into a Roth IRA, and remember, when you make a contribution to a Roth IRA, the contribution is not deductible, but then ultimately, down the road in retirement, after you've held the account for, at least 5 years and you're over 59 and a half years old, then you can take qualified distributions, which come out tax and penalty free. And you've been able to grow these funds tax deferred, for a while. So, really enjoying that compounding. So these are great vehicles, but it can be hard to get money in.
Yeah. And if you don't know about these rules, you could be in a sticky situation where you got to take that money out of the Roth IRA and correct that contribution. But you made mention of a key word there, Kate, and that was a deduction for the contribution. And so let's talk about what that means when folks are dealing with a traditional IRA. So let's just quickly pivot. I know we're going to stay on the Roth IRA topic here, but let's just highlight the differences here real quick when it comes to a traditional IRA.
Right. And I think it's almost a natural this is a great transition too, because, when you're thinking about, oh, geez, all right, well, now I make too much money. I can't contribute to a Roth IRA. What are my options? Right. So maybe you think about a traditional IRA. Right.
Yeah, because there is no limit on income for a traditional IRA. You do need earned income. So again, let's reiterate the fact that if you're going to make any contributions to any IRA, you need earned income in the year in which you make the contribution. But yeah, in terms of a traditional IRA, there's no limit on income whatsoever. You can be earning well over $1 million, and you can make a contribution to an IRA. Again, you're subject to the annual limits, which are $7,000 or $8,000 if you're age 50 and over. So not a whole lot of money here, Kate, in the grand scheme of things. This is really one of those accounts where if you're interested in building this is something that happens over time, right? This is an annual exercise in choosing where you're going to be putting some of your savings, right? I want to invest in different buckets, right? To build wealth over time. And when it comes to IRAs, it becomes this annual exercise. That these aren't huge contributions, but you're doing this on a regular basis. So you build it slowly over time. You get that compounded growth.
Right, and also just to highlight those Roth IRA contributions that you showed earlier. Remember those are combined. So if you're doing traditional IRA and Roth IRA contributions, if you're eligible to do a Roth IRA. And you're also doing traditional IRA, those are the caps for those amounts combined. So meaning, if I'm doing $3,000 into a Roth IRA and I'm 40 years old, I can then only do, $4,000 into my traditional IRA. Again, that cap is $7,000 combined.
That's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's something that folks really need to keep in mind when it comes to tracking all this.
And that's assuming I've had that $7,000 in earned income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But one of the key things with a traditional IRA is, so there's no limit on income, but the key question is, can I deduct my contribution? And again, we a lot of times we talk about, some of these generalizations when it comes to financial terms, right? Most people, when they think of an IRA, they think about making essentially tax deductible contributions. So, you're getting deduction on your tax return, right? And then you're getting growth over time inside the IRA. And then when you make distributions down the road, you're going to deal with owing income tax or so, but there's no taxation on what happens while it's inside the IRA, and at least you've enjoyed a tax deduction when you've made your contribution. But, it depends. Can I deduct my contribution? Well, listen, it depends. And it really depends on, one, your income, and two, are you covered by a employer plan or a qualified retirement plan? And so there's rules and there's limits on what this means for folks in terms of their ability to deduct an IRA contribution that we wanted to highlight here, because this goes into how do I get dollars into any kind of IRA I want, and what is the tax impact on me for doing so? So
right, and it might not just be you; it could also be your spouse, whether or not your spouse is covered by an employer plan as well.
That's right.
And the other little caveat too to think about is sometimes, you might have an employer plan through work and, you're not able to put funds into your employer plan. But if the employer is actually contributing to that plan, that still counts as participation in the employer plan if the employer is, funding that account for you.
So let's review some of the numbers here when it comes to what this means for being eligible for a tax deduction. So let's start with if you're filing single and you are covered by an employer plan, you can take a full deduction on your IRA contribution if your income is less than $79,000. And then just like we were talking about before, when it came to Roth IRAs, can I make a contribution? Well, if you're over certain dollar amounts, you can make a contribution, but it may not be a full contribution. It could be a partial. So in this scenario, again, for a single filer covered by a plan, a qualified plan, if your income is between $79,000 and $89,000 for the year, you can make a contribution, but just a partial. You can make a contribution, but only a partial deduction. Excuse me.
Right.
Can I deduct that amount? It's a partial deduction. And here's where we get into the issue here is if you're making over $89,000 of taxable income, filing single, there is no deduction allowed. Again, if you're covered by an employer plan. If you're not covered, there's a full deduction, right? So that's an easy scenario, right? If there is no employer plan involved and you want to make a contribution and you're earning well above $89,000 and you're filing single, you can make a full deduction.
Right. And in fact, there's no income limit. Yeah, for that traditional IRA contribution, as long as you're not covered by a qualified plan.
Yeah. So, it's all in the details. And again, it's all about your particular situation, right? So if you're having a discussion with friends, colleagues about, making contributions to IRAs or using them in terms of your own financial plan, everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different. That's what we wanted to highlight today. If we move into the next category, if you're married filing jointly and you are covered by an employer plan, the income limits are this. So if your taxable income is $126,000 or less, you can make an IRA contribution, get a full deduction. If your taxable income is between $126,000 and $146,000, you can have a partial deduction. And if your taxable income is above $146,000, married filing jointly, and you're covered by an employer plan, there is no deduction for your IRA contribution. So you're getting you think you might be getting a tax benefit here, but you're actually not allowed to take that deduction if you're above these limits. And then the last category, Kate, you mentioned this before, right? And listen, for a married couple, right, both folks could be working. One spouse could be covered by a plan. The other spouse may not be. The other spouse may not be working at all. So this is if you're married filing jointly, and your spouse is covered by an employer plan, the rules allow you to have higher income limits before you get phased out of your ability to deduct. And so the example here is if this is the case, married filing jointly, spouse is covered by employer plan, taxable income is $236,000 or less, you can have a full deduction for that IRA contribution. Income between $236,000 and $246,000, partial deduction. And taxable income above $246,000. So, a full $100,000 above the previous example.
A lot more generous here.
Yeah. No deduction.
Right.
Allowed. Go ahead, Kate. Yeah.
Yeah. I think all this makes sense, right? Because if you're covered by an employer plan and you're making pre-tax, contributions to that employer plan, remember you're going to get to, some of that income that you're, contributing to the plan is not going to be taxed. So if you were then able to do another tax deductible contribution to a traditional IRA, that would be a lot of income that you, would get to kind of not pay tax on, right? So I think this probably makes sense from, like the IRS is letting you take a tax deduction on some, but not all, right?
Yeah, and those limits are a lot higher for employer plans too, a whole lot higher than IRS.
Exactly. So this kind of, I think, is preventing, being able to not pay tax on a good chunk of money.
So just again, as a reminder, if you're not covered by a plan, spouse not covered by a plan, you don't have to worry about the taking away of a deduction. You get your full deduction, right? If there's no wrench in the plan there in terms of being covered by an employer plan, you can take your full deduction for your IRA contribution. And then one of the things that you can, hey, how do I check if I'm covered by an employer plan? Well, one of the things you can do is take a look at your W-2 and look at box 13. So, if you want to get in the weeds here a little bit, you take a look at your W-2, box 13. If there's a check mark in box 13, that means you are covered by an employer plan, qualified plan. So just as a reminder in terms of what these plans are, think about your 401ks, your 403bs, a profit sharing plan, a SEP plan, a simple IRA plan, a 457 plan, things like that. And if you're wondering if you're covered, you can talk to, your employer and get some confirmation on that and take a look at your W-2 as well.
That's great advice.
So what's the solution?
Is there another way?
Yeah. What's the solution? If I want to get dollars into a Roth IRA and my income limits are too high, and let's say I'm also covered by an employer plan and now I can't make a deduction for my traditional IRA contribution. Well, one of the things that is allowed under the tax law is this concept called the backdoor Roth contribution. Think about it as like an indirect, multi-step way to get dollars into a Roth IRA. Congress makes you jump through a couple different hoops in order to make this a legitimate transaction. And essentially what you're doing here is, number one, you are making a non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA with the intention of then converting that non-deductible contribution to a Roth IRA. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah. And I think, you got to be careful here too, right? So you're making that. So you're essentially, remember, there's no income limit to make a traditional IRA contribution. It's just whether or not it's deductible, right? So we're making that non-deductible IRA contribution. You're doing that conversion, right, into a Roth IRA account. And you've really got to watch your timing here too, right? You want to make sure that you can't
forget about what the steps involved here.
You can't. We've unfortunately heard some folks have done, non-deductible IRA contributions with the intent of doing, the conversion into a Roth IRA, and then the funds kind of sit there. Because you want to do that conversion as soon as possible, because if there are earnings, there could be a whole nother different tax layer, but we'll get into that a little bit more too.
Yeah. So typically, if you just wanted to, talk about a typical timeline here, I'll make this non-deductible contribution to my IRA. Let's say it's Monday. A couple of business days later, then I convert that contribution over to my Roth IRA. So you can actually see the transactions, hit the account, settle in the account, and then the conversion happens shortly thereafter. Right. And now you've gotten money into a Roth IRA. Essentially, you can think about it as this contribution, but what you're really doing is you're converting these dollars, right, from IRA to Roth IRA. So whenever you're doing conversion, as we've talked about before, there's rules involved, and you got to pay attention to those rules. And you also have to look at your personal situation in terms of what kind of resources do you have currently in different types of retirement accounts, including regular traditional IRAs.
Right. Because in an example where an individual doesn't have any other IRA money, they have an IRA with a zero balance, they make the contribution, the non-deductible IRA contribution, and then they convert it into a Roth IRA, that's a non-taxable event. But let's talk about this event where, they have other IRA assets.
Yeah. So it's not unusual that, somebody may have assets that are already built up in a traditional IRA, and now they find themselves, a high earner. They want to get money into the Roth IRA. So they say, okay, great. I'm going to go through this backdoor Roth IRA contribution process in order to get those dollars in. But, you got to pay attention to what a potential tax consequence could be if you do that conversion. And so we want to highlight this provision called the Pro-Rata Rule. And essentially, it applies to IRAs that contain pre-tax and after-tax dollars, essentially deductible and non-deductible contributions, right? Not unusual for somebody to find themselves in that situation. And so any distribution must contain some percentage of after-tax and pre-tax dollars if the IRA contains that mixture of pre-tax and after-tax contributions.
You can't pick and choose. You can't say, hey, I'm doing this conversion. I just want to take the after-tax portion IRS. You can't do that?
No. Unfortunately, isolating those after-tax dollars only, it'd be great. But IRS thought of that, and so they've put together this pro-rata rule. And so let's take it through an example here. And this applies, by the way, to all IRAs that a taxpayer may own, right? I could have an IRA at, I can have an IRA at XYZ brokerage. I can have another IRA at another one that I funded long ago or so. It's not unusual to have IRAs in multiple places, as careers change and you just build up dollars, right? I can also have money in a SEP IRA, for example. You got to add all the dollars up in all of your IRAs, right? So if I have an IRA and a SEP IRA, I would add those together. In this example, let's say I have $1 million combined in my IRA and my SEP IRA. And of that $1 million, I've kept track of my contributions over time. The total value of after-tax dollars in that million is $175,000. So what you need to do is you divide the after-tax dollars by the total value of all of my IRAs. That's $175,000 in this example divided by $1 million. And that means 17.5% of my IRAs consist of after-tax dollars. Okay. And so if I make a conversion, right, if I want to go down this backdoor Roth IRA conversion route, I can. That's great, right? But I need to go through this exercise first if I have existing dollars in an IRA to figure out, okay, will I owe any tax on this conversion, right? I think I may be just contributing $7,000 to an IRA with the intention of converting it immediately to a Roth IRA. And I'm thinking maybe there's no tax consequence to that, but that may not be the case. And so in this example, 17.5% of every IRA distribution would be tax-free, and the balance would be fully taxable. So if I were to convert $7,000 to a Roth IRA in this example, 17.5% of that $7,000 would be tax-free. That equates to $1,225. But the balance, $5,775,000 would be taxable. I'd have to report that as taxable income. So I may be going into this thinking that the $7,000 would be fully tax-free via conversion, but because I already have pre-tax dollars in my IRA, only a portion of that, $1,225 out of the $7,000 would be tax-free.
Right, and that comes out tax as ordinary income too. That's not right. That's coming out because it's pre-tax dollars going into after-tax dollars. So that could be a big tax bill. So really be careful there.
Tax at your marginal rate. So, $5,775 may not seem like a big number, but that gets added on top of all the rest of your taxable income for the year. And so the rate you pay on that could be quite high.
Right. So that's a great heads up. So let's we've got a visual here too. Just on
So like I said before, I like illustrations here to help kind of understand some of these concepts. And so, we have an illustration of what that pro-rata rule looks like. On the left-hand side, we're looking at the total value of my IRAs in this example. A traditional plus my SEP IRA is $1 million. 17.5 of that is after tax. That's $175,000, meaning that there's $825,000 of pre-tax money in my IRAs. If I were to make that $7,000 distribution, that ratio stays the same. So the $7,000, I still maintain that 17.5 tax-free, and then the balance is taxable in terms of what how that pro-rata rule works.
Yeah, I think that visual is really helpful, so you can see the percentage is the same. And that could be an unwanted tax surprise for sure. So being very careful with that. So it almost seems like if a backdoor Roth IRA conversion would really best be suited potentially for someone who doesn't have other IRA money that's pre-tax. Because you would get hit with this pro-rata rule if you're doing that Roth IRA conversion, if you had, additional IRA money. So is there any other like workaround, Tom?
Well, so, I think this highlights the issue that, whenever you're talking about a planning concept, it may not be right for everybody, right? And certainly an example like this, I got to really think about, is it worth it for me to do this over a period of years if I'm going to be paying tax on a pretty decent portion of that conversion amount, right? The cleanest way, as you mentioned, Kate, would be, for somebody who didn't have any money in a pre-tax IRA whatsoever, and they wanted to open up one for the first time, make that contribution, and then immediately convert that, via the backdoor strategy. Then,
Right.
There is no tax owed on that, nice and clean.
Right.
It's just a multi-step way to essentially fund a Roth IRA. And so, everybody's situation is a little bit different. You might consider, if you're working, we talked about, being covered by a qualified plan. If you have an IRA that does have some pre-tax and after-tax dollars in it, or just if it's all pre-tax or so, you might think about maybe rolling that IRA into your 401k, right? So if your 401k allows for rollovers of outside dollars, every plan is a little bit different. You'd have to check with your plan provider. That could be an option. You could roll dollars into a 401k.
Right. And not always ideal, right? As your IRA,
you have to think about, you have to think about what those options look like. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that could be a way to essentially eliminate the dollars that are in IRA world, for example, for somebody. And if there is a mixture in somebody's IRA, that's the way you can isolate the pre-tax. You can roll those pre-tax dollars to the 401k, leaving the after-tax, and then convert those after-tax dollars over to a Roth. So again, you'd have to think about if that is a strategy that would be right for your situation, something to factor in to how this concept works. But yeah, I mean, you just got to make sure that you're keeping in mind this pro rata provision for backdoor Roth conversions.
I think that's a really good heads up. And the other one too is for individuals who are considering the backdoor Roth conversion. When you are making that non-deductible IRA contribution into a traditional IRA, being very sensitive to then do that Roth conversion right away, because any earnings that you're then converting are also going to come out, as taxable. So being careful that, once you have those earnings in there, now we've got a whole nother ball of wax. So making sure that.
Whenever you have a multi-step process, keeping track of all the steps is certainly key to that. And so that's a great point, Kate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so, I think, again, multi-steps, whose responsibility is this, right? How do we keep track of this? How do individuals keep track of, this process?
So, anybody who's responsible for paying taxes needs to keep really good records when it comes to, tax forms and things like that. So the responsibility does fall to the taxpayer, especially when you're making these after-tax non-deductible contributions to an IRA. But the good news is there's a form for that. Right, the IRS has forms for
is
everything.
that good news or bad news, Tom? I don't know.
Good news is there's a form for that. Bad news is you got to figure out which
right.
one you got to deal with. But the other piece of good news is that we're here to talk to you about which ones matter in this situation. So let's go through a couple of these things. Not that we want to get into too much tax code stuff here, but if you're making non-deductible IRA contributions, you can track that via Form 8606.
Are we going to be tested on this after?
Perhaps. Yeah. Maybe we'll send out a survey afterwards. So this is a form that we would recommend that you make sure you complete. Keep track of your non-deductible contributions and keep that form in your records. And then the other form that just tracks IRA contributions in general is Form 5498. So again, whenever you're making contributions, this is a form that you want to make sure that that you're keeping track of. And then let's not forget that when you make the distribution out of the IRA, there will be a distribution form, and that is recorded on Form 1099-R. And the R is, it depicts the fact that you're making a distribution from a retirement account. And so from a tax standpoint, this form gets reported to the IRS, and it's something that you would include in your tax return. And, at the end of the day, it's up to you if you're doing your own taxes to make sure that you're recording this correctly, or providing the correct information to your tax provider, so that your tax provider knows how to record this properly on your tax return, so that, the tax consequence would be recorded correctly.
Yeah, I think that's a great heads up. Just making sure that, you're dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, and keeping those forms. It's great advice. So, this was a lot. So let's wrap it up and maybe, do a little summary here too.
Yeah.
So, really, when I'm hearing this again, I get very fearful of that pro-rata rule. So, I don't know, let's talk about maybe, who the ideal candidate might be, and, break that down a little.
Yeah, I would say, again, the backdoor Roth IRA contribution is something that a lot of folks who are higher earners need to pay attention to. Again, if you're below some of those income limits that we talked about before, if you're not covered by a plan, you can get money into a Roth IRA just by a regular contribution. Doesn't have to be too complicated. So, ideal candidates for a backdoor Roth IRA contribution would be high earners. Folks that don't have any money in an existing IRA, right? So we talked about, the pro-rata rule. If you don't have any money in a Roth IRA, you don't have to deal with that. You can have conversions that are nice and clean. Somebody who's covered by an employer plan and your income, again, may be above those limits. This is something where if you want to get dollars into a Roth IRA, it's something you should think about. And then certainly, I guess at the end of the day, it's anybody who, everybody's making a decision, Kate, about where they put their next dollar of savings,
Sure.
right? That next dollar of savings could just stay in a regular brokerage account, right? That's one of many options that folks have. But Roth IRAs are another opportunity, right? And you just need to know exactly how those accounts work, how it fits into your overall financial plan. So, they're great for somebody who desires that future tax-free growth. And again, one of the points that Kate, you made earlier was, if you think about this, not only for yourself and your spouse, but also for the next generation. We talk to our clients a lot about, legacy planning and, who's this money for, after you have taken care of yourselves. For the most part, a lot of our clients are interested in leaving some assets to the next generation, and Roth IRAs become it's an attractive way to leave some dollars to the next generation. They still got to deal with all the new rules when it comes to inherited IRAs and all that stuff.
And if you're confused with those rules, we've got a pod for that.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah. So that's.
Yeah. So I think those are the ideal candidates here, Kate. Again, it's a way to get these dollars into a Roth IRA if you need to navigate, the rules that are in place. But you just need to be careful. You need to keep track of the recording of this when you're doing your taxes every year.
Well, I think that's a great heads up. Well, Tom, thanks so much. This was, I think, a really helpful dive into backdoor Roth conversions. I think a lot of our listeners hear about it, but there are a lot of pitfalls, especially the pro-rata rule. So I think that, hopefully we helped clear up some of that confusion surrounding backdoor Roth conversions. And be sure to like and subscribe. We're Amplified Wealth according to plan. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.